All right, it's no longer Radio Row, it's Media Row, as we were just talking about here. This is Aaron Schatz from FTN Fantasy. If you know DVOA, you know this man's work from way back. And before we get to talking about where the Broncos stack up, let's kind of talk big picture here, quarterback, over the course of the season. Because when we had this conversation this time last year, your advice analytically was keep Russell Wilson. So 12 months later, Russ still in the playoffs with another team, but the Broncos finding their quarterback. What did you think of Bo Nix's season and the decision they made this year?
The first thing I'd say is that it is not very often that you take the sixth quarterback in a draft and get a good guy out of it. I think that, like a lot of people, it took me some time to get off my priors when it came to Bo Nix, especially because in the first couple of games, he was just throwing nothing but short stuff, which is what we thought he was going to do coming into the league, and therefore we're like, well, here we go. This is what we all expected. But the fact is that as the year went along, they opened the offense up to him more and more. He played better and better. It ended up being a pretty good year, and I'm surprised, and it's delightful for Broncos fans. It definitely looks like you have the quarterback for the next few years.
So in seeing that, kind of mentioning what he did early and how he maybe not bounced back from it, but sort of built on the rough start that he had and grew from that, what's the next step from him as you observe him to where you're talking about, okay, this guy is, if not a elite tier quarterback, perhaps settles in that next level tier where you can win ball games?
I mean, you want to see him play like that for another year, not like, without the first 3 or 4 games, just what he played like in like the last 12 or 13 games. Mm-hmm. But he's good. Like, he does things out of structure, like all the scrambling, and so that's not a problem. You don't really need to suggest that he needs to do better at that. I think it was a very promising rookie year. Now, listen, here's the problem with promising rookie years, is that often you expect guys to take another step in year 2. Mm-hmm. And they don't, because there isn't another step to take, because they were already good as rookies. It's all, very rare to be like Dan Marino and have the really good rookie year and then take another step.
Yeah.
But if he can just do this without September, if he can just do what he did from October till the end of the season, then that's a step.
With quarterbacks maybe don't take the step, just to bring it to another quarterback for a second, because C.J. Stroud, it can be argued it was maybe not a regression, but certainly lateral at best, a lateral move for him at best. So how does Bo maybe avoid some of the pitfalls that befell C.J. Stroud this past
If you can explain to me why the Houston offensive line fell apart this year with mostly the exact same guys that were on it the year before, I would tell you to have Denver not do that. Because I think the biggest problem for C.J. Stroud was his receivers got injured and his offensive line, with mostly the same guys, just fell apart, and the offensive coordinator couldn't adapt to these changes, and so Stroud was having all kinds of problems. As long as Nix doesn't run into the same issues, then I can't see him going backwards the way the Houston offense did.
And the thing is, that was a good O-line in 2023, and the Broncos had a good O-line in 2024.
And that's all coming back, right?
Yes.
All 5 starters are coming back.
All 5 coming back, yes. Like, in theory, they should be okay, but like you mentioned, stuff happens. Now, you mentioned the receivers for Houston, and that kind of brings an interesting discussion for the Broncos as they go into this offseason. Sean Payton, earlier today when he was talking about musts and needs, he pointed to running backs and tight ends as kind of the area where they're really looking this offseason, specifically looking for that Jimmy Graham, Alvin Kamara type of chess piece. He calls it a joker that he can move around. So in terms of the Broncos at the skill spots, what types of players do you think they need? And is it free agency or trade that you find them, or are they better suited going to the draft to kind of fill those 2 positional needs?
I'm an analytics guy, and analytics guys never advise drafting a running back. I would advise Denver to draft a running back.
What?
This is a team that ranked number 1 in ESPN's run block win rate and number 24 in run offense DVOA. That is an absurd combination. I don't mean to diss on Javonte Williams and Estime and those guys, but that is an absurd combination.
Yeah.
What we learned this year from Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry and Josh Jacobs was that great running backs need a great line to open it up for them to do their thing. And Denver looks like they have a really good offensive line as far as run blocking goes. You just need to find a star running back to put behind it. If they can somehow get Ashton Janty, that would be amazing. But even if they don't, like to draft another running back in the first or second round who's going to be better than what they have now, they've got the line to support it.
And it's funny, we were just down at the Senior Bowl last week, and we're watching someone like Devin Neal from Kansas, for example, and that's somebody, if you follow the CU Buffs, you probably know him for the wrong reasons because he lit up CU this past year, but the quality of depth is there probably into early day 3 at running back. But you mentioned Janty, and I know analytically it'd be, don't take a running back in round 1, but can he be the guy who's worthy if he's sitting there at pick 20, 21 and being taken?
I don't think it's worthy of trading up for.
Okay.
But if he's there at pick 20, I think you have the offensive line to make it valuable.
Okay.
If I had an average offensive line run blocking, I would say no. But I think that Denver's offensive line run blocking is good enough to make Janty magic happen.
Analytically, what about tight end if they look in that direction in round 1?
I mean, there are some good prospects in this draft. Tight end is a hard position to judge with analytics coming out of college because so many guys go to like a place like Iowa and they don't really play very much in the passing game, and then they come to the NFL and they turn into George Kittle. So I don't know who's out there who's going to be a star tight end. You have to sort of trust your scouts to pick out the people, but it's definitely a place where Denver could use an upgrade.
All right, moving on to the Super Bowl, just in general, where do you see this game most likely being decided on Sunday?
I think that the biggest issue is Steve Spagnuolo's defensive scheming against Jalen Hurts struggling with the blitz.
Okay.
Because the fact is the Eagles' offense and their mindset is so based around explosive runs by Saquon Barkley. And the Chiefs' defense was very good this year at stopping explosive runs, which means if Barkley doesn't get the explosives, this really is in Hurts' hands. And Spagnuolo is a great designer of blitzes, and Hurts was 16th in DVOA against the blitz this year. So it'll be really interesting to see that matchup.
And inverting it to talk about Philly's defense versus Patrick Mahomes and company, obviously Vic Fangio, a lot of experience going up against Patrick Mahomes, not successful in the win-loss column, but successful in at least limiting the damage and particularly shutting them down in the red zone, forcing the Chiefs to settle for field goals.
I am sorry to have to remind Broncos fans of this fact, but the defenses that Vic Fangio had facing Patrick Mahomes in Denver, and by the way, the one he had in Miami last year as well, were nowhere near as good as this Philadelphia Eagles. This Eagles defense is the best defense in the league this year. Those Denver defenses were ranked like 12th or 13th against the pass by my numbers.
Correct.
That Miami defense was 23rd. This is the best defense that Fangio has ever had to go up against Mahomes. So I don't really care much about Fangio's past against Mahomes because what matters is these players.
If he'd had these players, he might still be the Denver Broncos coach.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to
no matter
draft
who the
as well,
quarterback was,
you're going to draft defense as well as the Eagles have over the last couple of years. Yeah.
What do you think, like, with the Eagles, personnel-wise, they just, especially on the defensive line, they just basically almost plug and play guys. Like, what is Howie Roseman doing to kind of keep that line moving, to keep the talent flow?
They're drafting high. Yeah. I mean, like, I don't know how Milton Williams, the fact that Milton Williams turned into a good player is really useful. He was like a third-round pick. But, I mean, everybody knew Jalen Carter was this good. So this is not like a shock. Oh, Jalen Carter turned out really good. Is not a real shock. I think they draft defensive players high, and they don't get busts. They get guys who perform as you would expect based on their draft position.
And to go to Kansas City back to there for a moment, the thing that people in Denver want to know is, like, at what point does this break? At what point does their imperial phase ebb just a little bit to where, maybe the Broncos can't have a long run like the Chiefs, but that they can be in position to capitalize if the Chiefs wobble just a bit.
The whole league wants to know, and I don't know the answer to that, because the fact is it's not just Mahomes, it's that the coaching is so good. I think if Spagnuolo took a head job somewhere, that would definitely be a problem. If their defense, if Chris Jones stopped playing well and a couple of other players stopped playing well and their defense got bad, then Mahomes would become Dan Marino, or he'd become Drew Brees, right? Like, where you have a great offense but the defense isn't good, so you're not going to win every year. But I don't think you can, unfortunately, you can't count on Mahomes not being one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the league for at least the next 10 years. That's just how it's going to be.
And yet those AFC West teams have no problem attracting top-level proven coaching talent, as we're seeing with the Raiders recently.
I mean no disrespect, but at age 74, I would like to be retired. And I would not want to be head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. I would not want to be head coach of anything. I would want to be sitting at home.
Especially when you've got a Super Bowl ring in your back pocket.
Already have a Super Bowl ring. That is absolutely right. I don't have one of those, and I still want to be retired at age 74.
All right. Aaron Schatz, appreciate your time. That's Aaron Schatz from FTN Fantasy. Check it out, ftnfantasy.com. I'm a subscriber. You should be a subscriber, too, if you want everything analytics, if you want to go back through years of DVOA. They've got information I use on a weekly basis. You can use it, too. Check it out, ftnfantasy.com. I'm Mace. This is Aaron Schatz. This is Orange and Blue Today. Take care. Thanks for watching.